I was an ER doctor who saved lives until I discovered my grandson was abused and uncovered a revenge that destroyed my family. I'm Carol Martinez, 65 years old. Up until 5 years ago, I worked as an emergency room physician. For 30 years, I saved countless lives. In the ER, I made decisions in the space between life and death. Now that I'm retired, I spend my days peacefully in a quiet suburban home. My son, Michael, got married 2 years ago. His wife, Jennifer, is a bright, kind woman. 2 months ago, they had a son, a little boy named Ethan. Jennifer is truly a wonderful daughter-in-law, frequently visiting with my grandson. I loved her dearly. When Jennifer learned I was a former doctor, her eyes lit up. "You were an ER physician? That's amazing. I really admire you." She looked up to me. Whenever she had any concerns about Ethan, she came to me right away. I was happy to give advice. But lately, something about my son had been bothering me. 2 weeks ago, when I visited their home one evening, Ethan was crying. Michael muttered irritably, "He's crying again. Give me a break." Jennifer hurriedly said to me, "I'm sorry. Michael's exhausted from work stress." Michael was holding a glass in his hand. It seemed he'd been drinking more lately. A week ago, Michael called me. Honestly, parenting is harder than I thought. I asked worriedly, "Are you okay? Can I help?" "No, I'm fine. It's just, when the baby keeps crying, I feel like I'm losing my mind." I could hear Ethan crying in the background. Michael clicked his tongue softly. "Here we go again." There was clear irritation in his voice. 3 days ago, Jennifer came to my house alone. Her eyes were welling with tears. "I need to talk to you." I sat her down and listened. "My husband has been cold toward Ethan lately. He won't even hold him." Jennifer continued in a trembling voice. "Yesterday when Ethan cried, my husband yelled, 'Shut up. I'm scared. What if he does something?' While I worried about my son, part of me wanted to believe he was just tired." Last night, I invited them both for dinner. Michael arrived looking exhausted. During the meal, Ethan started crying. Michael sighed deeply. "Here we go again." Jennifer stood up. "I'll check on him," Michael muttered under his breath. I never wanted a kid in the first place. Hearing those words broke my heart, but I couldn't say anything. Was my son being crushed under the pressure of new fatherhood? And then today, Saturday morning, Jennifer and Michael came to visit together. "We're going shopping. Could you watch Ethan for us?" I answered with a smile, "Of course." As Jennifer handed Ethan to me, she smiled gently. "Thank you so much." There was something indescribably deep in that smile, but at the time I had no idea what it meant. As I saw them off at the front door, I held my grandson close. Ethan was sleeping peacefully in my arms. What an adorable child. This tiny life had brought new joy to mine. I watched from the window as their car drove away. About 30 minutes later, Ethan woke up. At first, he seemed in good spirits. I bounced my grandson while sitting on the living room sofa. Ethan's tiny hand gripped my finger. That warmth filled my heart. But then, a few minutes later, Ethan suddenly started crying. At first, I thought it was normal crying. Maybe he was hungry or had a wet diaper. I tried to feed him with the bottle Jennifer had prepared, but Ethan refused the bottle. He shook his head and cried even harder. I walked around holding him. I rocked him. I sang lullabies, but the crying didn't stop. If anything, it got more intense. I started to panic. Something was wrong. This wasn't normal crying. The instincts I developed over 30 years as an ER physician kicked in. There was something abnormal about Ethan's crying. It had the sound of pain, of desperation. I switched into doctor mode. I began to observe calmly. I looked at Ethan's eyes. They weren't focusing. His gaze was unfixed, somehow vacant. At times his body seemed to go rigid, and then I noticed it. On the collar of Ethan's outfit, there was a dried stain, vomit. Jennifer hadn't mentioned anything. My heart started racing. Something was wrong. This wasn't just fussiness. There was a medical problem. I laid Ethan on the sofa. His little body was trembling as he cried. I needed to check his diaper. Thinking that, I reached for Ethan's clothes. I unfastened the snap buttons on his little romper. In that moment, my hands froze. On his abdomen, there were multiple bruises, yellowing, discoloration, old contusions. As a physician, I understood immediately. These injuries were at least a week old. My hands trembled, but I couldn't stop. I pulled up his clothes further. Fresh bruises on his thighs, purple, still new from a few days ago. I gently touched Ethan's head. There was swelling at the back of his skull. Everything I knew medically connected at once in my brain. This was abuse. Classic symptoms of shaken baby syndrome, signs of brain damage seen in babies who've been violently shaken. Time seemed to stop. As a physician, I'd seen hundreds of abuse cases. But my own grandson, my own family, Ethan kept crying. Now that crying sounded like screams of pain. I looked at my hands. These hands had saved hundreds of lives. But now these hands wouldn't stop shaking, because the tiny life I loved most had been hurt by someone. And then my greatest fear crossed my mind. Who did this? Michael's face appeared in my thoughts. His recent irritability, the drinking, the words I never wanted a kid, the complaints that the baby's crying was annoying. No, that couldn't be. My son would never do such a thing. The son I raised wouldn't hurt his own child. But the evidence was right in front of me. These bruises were proof that someone had hurt Ethan. Jennifer's words came back to me. My husband has been cold toward Ethan lately. I'm scared. Was she trying to tell me something? Was she unable to say it directly because she was protecting her husband? I took a deep breath. This wasn't the time to get emotional. As a physician, I had things to do. I had to save Ethan. I took out my cell phone. I called Michael and Jennifer. The phone rang but eventually went to voicemail. I left a message in a shaking voice. Michael, Jennifer, please call me back immediately. I'm taking Ethan to the hospital. Contact me urgently. Next, I considered calling an ambulance, but it would be faster in my car. The hospital was 15 minutes from home, and the hospital I was heading to was St. Mary's Hospital, the place where I'd worked for 30 years. There were colleagues there I could trust. I gently picked up Ethan. It's okay, Ethan. Grandma's going to protect you. Tears streamed down my cheeks, but this wasn't the time to cry. I got in the car and secured Ethan in the car seat. Ethan was still crying, but his cries seemed to be getting weaker. That made me even more anxious. When a baby stops crying, it's not always a good thing. He could be losing consciousness. I pressed the accelerator. I might have been going a bit over the speed limit, but my grandson's life was at stake. The light turned red. I came to a complete stop, checked for safety, and proceeded calmly but urgently. As I drove, my mind was in turmoil. Did my son do this, or was it someone else? If it was Michael, what should I do? Turn my son over to the police? But I had to protect Ethan. That was the top priority. 5 more minutes to the hospital. I couldn't hear Ethan crying anymore. I checked in the rearview mirror. His eyes were closed. Was he sleeping or... Wake up, Grandma's here. I pulled into the St. Mary's Hospital parking lot. I turned off the engine and quickly picked up Ethan. I ran to the emergency entrance. The automatic doors opened. That hospital smell, disinfectant and clean linen. The smell I'd breathed every day for 30 years. The nurse at the reception desk saw me and immediately stood up. Dr. Martinez! I suspect abuse. Please call a pediatrician immediately. My voice was calm, my physician's voice. The nurse's face changed right away. She picked up the intercom. I headed to an exam room, still holding Ethan. I'd walked this corridor hundreds of times, but today I was walking as a grandmother, not as a doctor. And then a fateful reunion awaited. The exam room door opened and a familiar face appeared, Dr. Sarah Kim, my former colleague and pediatric specialist. She looked at me with a surprised expression. Carol, what happened? I chose my words carefully. Sarah, look at this. I don't think I'm wrong. I pulled up Ethan's clothes and showed her the bruises. Sarah's expression changed completely. She became the doctor. She laid Ethan on the exam table and began carefully checking his entire body. I stood beside her, watching intently. A few minutes later, Sarah looked up. Her eyes held a mixture of sadness and anger. Carol, your assessment is correct. This is shaken baby syndrome. I'll arrange for a CT scan and retinal exam immediately. Sarah gave instructions to the nurses, and they took Ethan to the testing room. I was told to wait in the waiting room, but my feet wouldn't move. For 30 years, I'd worked at this hospital. I'd always been the one giving instructions. Now, all I could do was wait. The tests took 30 minutes. During that time, I checked my cell phone repeatedly. No calls from Michael or Jennifer. Could they really be unreachable for this long just shopping? Or was there some reason? Sarah came back. Looking at her face, my heart nearly stopped. The results are in. Sarah invited me into the exam room. CT images were displayed on the wall monitor. There's mild brain damage, Sarah said, pointing to the image. We've also confirmed retinal hemorrhaging and multiple contusions all over the body. These were inflicted at different times. As a physician, I understood what that meant, not from a single incident. No, Sarah nodded with a stern expression. This is a pattern of repeated abuse. Carol, we have to report this to Child Protective Services and the police. It's mandated by law. I took a deep breath. I know. Please, report it. Sarah placed a hand on my shoulder. Carol, this isn't your fault. You saved Ethan. But my heart felt like it was being torn apart. What if Michael was the perpetrator? What if my son had been hurting his own child? As a mother, what had I overlooked? 30 minutes later, Michael and Jennifer came rushing into the hospital. Jennifer's face was pale. What happened? Where's Ethan? Her voice was shaking, perfect acting as a concerned mother. No, at the time I didn't think it was acting. Michael was in a panic. Mom, is my son okay? Tears were in his eyes. I didn't know what to say. Your son has been abused, and you might be the perpetrator. How could I possibly say that? Just then, a man walked down the hallway. The Martinez family? I'm Detective James Rodriguez, specializing in child abuse cases. The air froze. Jennifer gasped softly. Michael looked at the detective and lost all color in his face. Detective Rodriguez asked in a calm tone, "Who was the last person with Ethan?" Everyone's eyes turned to me. I answered, "I was. Michael and Jennifer left him with me this morning." The detective took out his notepad. What time was that? Around 10 o'clock. And before that? Jennifer answered, I was with him the whole time. There was a faint tremor in her voice. Was it fear or some other emotion? Detective Rodriguez turned back to me. Miss Carol Martinez, I have some questions for you. In that moment, I understood. They suspected me. I was the last one who had Ethan. Naturally, I'd be the first suspect. But I stayed calm. My training as a physician supported me. Detective, I'm a former ER physician. These injuries were inflicted at different times. Michael and Jennifer can verify that today was the first time I watched Ethan. Michael nodded. That's right. This was the first time Mom watched Ethan. Detective Rodriguez nodded. We'll verify that, but we also need to examine the records from the past 2 months. Sarah brought the medical records. There are records from a checkup 2 weeks ago. The record said no abnormalities, but look at this picture. There's a small bruise on his arm. Jennifer spoke up. The pediatrician missed that. I was worried and asked the doctor several times, but he said it was fine. Detective Rodriguez looked around at everyone. Everyone, I'm going to need to speak with each of you individually. Michael was called first. As I watched my son's back disappearing into another room, my heart ached. If it really was Michael, but I wanted to believe. My son was a kind person, not the kind who would hurt a baby. 30 minutes later, Michael returned. His face was ashen. Next, Jennifer was called. As she stood up, she swayed slightly. Michael tried to support her, but Jennifer shook her head. After Jennifer disappeared into the room, Michael sat next to me. Mom. His voice was shaking. They suspect me. They asked if I've been feeling stressed lately, if Ethan's crying irritates me. Michael held his head in his hands. I answered honestly, that work's been busy, that taking care of a baby is hard. And then the detective's eyes changed. My chest tightened. Michael, tell me the truth. Did you hurt Ethan? Michael looked up. His eyes were overflowing with tears. No, Mom, I love my son. Yes, I was tired. Yes, I was irritated, but I would never, ever hurt him. I looked into my son's eyes. For 30 years, I'd been able to spot lies, when patients tried to hide symptoms, when families didn't tell the truth. But there was no lie in Michael's eyes, only fear and confusion. I believe you. I squeezed my son's hand. An hour later, Jennifer returned. Her eyes were red and swollen. She'd been crying. She came over to us and collapsed into a chair, Jennifer said in a trembling voice. I'm scared. The detective kept asking me about my husband. Michael reacted. About me? What did you say? Jennifer wiped her tears. I told the truth, that you've been cold toward Ethan lately, that you started drinking, that you yelled, "Shut up." Michael's face contorted. Did you tell them I'm the perpetrator? No. Jennifer shook her head. But the detective asked, and I couldn't lie. Just then, Detective Rodriguez returned. Thank you all. The investigation will continue. Ethan will need to remain in the hospital for observation, I asked. Detective, who's the perpetrator? Detective Rodriguez answered carefully. At this point, we haven't identified anyone yet, but we are gathering evidence. He looked at Michael. There was clear suspicion in that gaze. Michael stood up. I didn't do anything. His voice sounded strangled. I would never hurt my son. But the eyes around us were cold. Nurses were whispering in the hallway, that young father. From stress. Poor baby. I put my arm around my son's shoulders. It's okay, Michael. The truth will come out. But deep down, doubts swirled. Was Michael really innocent? Or was I, as his mother, refusing to see my son's true nature? The next day, Detective Rodriguez called. Miss Martinez, could you come to the hospital? There's new information. I rushed to the hospital. Michael and Jennifer were already there. Michael looked like he hadn't slept all night. He had deep circles under his eyes. Jennifer sat beside him, looking at her husband with concern. Detective Rodriguez led us to a conference room. Several documents were laid out on the table. Everyone, first I need to confirm something. The detective looked at me. Ms. Martinez, we verified your alibi. You were not involved in this abuse. I felt relieved, but my heart pounded hard, waiting for the next words. The detective turned to Michael. Mr. Martinez, we've checked your company records. Michael's face went pale. Jennifer gripped her husband's hand. Last Wednesday at 2 p.m., you were in a meeting. Michael nodded. Yes, Monday, 3 days ago at 11 a.m., you were having lunch with a client. Yes. According to the medical records, some of Ethan's injuries were inflicted during exactly those time periods. The detective paused. Mr. Martinez, you have an alibi. The room fell silent. It took Michael a few seconds to understand the detective's words. You mean, you've removed me as a suspect? Michael collapsed into his chair. Thank you. He covered his face with both hands and began to cry. Jennifer rubbed Michael's back. Thank God. But there was something unnatural in her voice, and then the detective's gaze slowly turned to Jennifer. Silence filled the room. Heavy, tense silence. Jennifer looked up at the detective. What? Why are you looking at me? Ms. Jennifer. The detective's voice was quiet. Where were you on weekday afternoons? At home, taking care of Ethan. Any witnesses? Jennifer hesitated. No. Just me and Ethan. The detective picked up papers from the table. Yesterday, we obtained a search warrant. We examined your cell phone records. The blood drained from Jennifer's face. We found some interesting things in your search history. The detective read aloud, how to hurt a baby without leaving marks. Symptoms of shaken baby syndrome. How to avoid getting caught for abuse. My heart nearly stopped. Michael stared at his wife. Jennifer, what is this? Jennifer shook her head. No, I was just worried. I searched because I thought my husband might do something, but that excuse was far too weak. The detective continued. Furthermore, we investigated your social media accounts. Interestingly, you'd been researching Mr. Martinez for 3 years before you married him. Michael stood up. What does that mean? Miss Jennifer had been making multiple coincidental encounters at a cafe near Mr. Martinez's workplace. She approached him systematically. Something began connecting in my mind. Systematic approach, revenge, and this hospital. St. Mary's Hospital. Suddenly, an old memory resurfaced. 15 years ago, at this hospital, a young woman screaming in the waiting room, "Please see my sister first. Please." I stood up. "Wait. What's Jennifer's maiden name?" The detective answered, "Chen. Jennifer Chen. Chen. Emma Chen." My hands began to shake. Sarah checked the hospital's old records. March 15, 2010, a 12-year-old girl named Emma Chen. Sarah hurried out of the room. A few minutes later, she returned with an old file. I found it. Emma Chen, 12 years old, brought in from a traffic accident, died from internal bleeding. The attending physician was... Sarah looked at me. "It was you, Carol." The memory came back vividly. That day, the ER was crowded. A man with a heart attack had been brought in. He was in critical condition. I heard he had 3 children. I made the triage decision, prioritized the heart attack. Emma was made to wait in the waiting room. And 3 hours later, Emma died. I looked at Jennifer, 15 years ago, the 18-year-old girl crying in the waiting room. That was Jennifer. Jennifer slowly raised her face. There was no more acting in those eyes, cold eyes filled with hatred. "Did you remember?" Jennifer's voice was quiet. "That you let my sister die." I was speechless. Michael stared at his wife. "Jennifer, what are you talking about?" Jennifer was looking only at me. "You said, 'There's an order. The heart attack patient comes first.' I made the right decision as a physician, right?" Jennifer laughed. A cold, dry laugh. "You saved a man and killed my sister." "Jennifer," I said in a trembling voice. "At that time, I don't want to hear excuses." Jennifer stood up. "For 15 years I searched for you. I learned your name. I learned about your son. And I made a plan." Michael shouted, "You used me?" "That's right." Jennifer turned around. "I married you to get revenge on Carol. Having your child, hurting that child, it was all part of the plan." Michael was speechless at his wife's words. "So was I." Jennifer looked at me again. "Just like you let my sister die, I wanted to make your grandson suffer." In that moment, something inside me crumbled. "Jennifer, I didn't forget." Jennifer's eyes wavered. "Emma, you..." I continued through my tears. "Every year on March 15th, I can't sleep. I remember that day. I still have Emma's photo." Jennifer showed a momentary expression of confusion. "I saved hundreds of people, but I couldn't save Emma." My voice was shaking. "That's why I retired." For the first time, hesitation appeared in Jennifer's eyes. "You retired because..." I burned out. "Not just Emma. All the patients I couldn't save. They all stayed with me." The room was silent. "But Jennifer," I looked into her eyes, "your pain is real. I understand that. That's why I want to ask you, why did you hurt an innocent baby? Ethan is your son, the child you gave birth to." Tears overflowed from Jennifer's eyes. "When I lost my sister, I was 18. My parents were already divorced and no one supported me. My sister was everything to me." Her voice trembled. "When you said there's an order, my world ended. For 15 years I wasn't living. I only existed for revenge. But when I gave birth to Ethan, Jennifer collapsed. For the first time, I thought my sister was once this small too, but it was too late. The plan had already started. I couldn't stop it." Michael tried to approach his wife, but Jennifer waved her hand. "Don't touch me. I never loved you. Not once." Michael stood frozen. Tears streamed down his cheeks. Detective Rodriguez stood up. "Jennifer Chen Martinez, you're under arrest for child abuse." The sound of handcuffs clicking echoed in the quiet room. As Jennifer was being led away, she looked at me one last time. "Dr. Martinez, you were right. But I wasn't wrong either." I shook my head. "No, Jennifer, you were wrong. We both carry pain. But I didn't hurt my grandson. That's the difference." Jennifer turned back. "Please protect Ethan." I nodded. The tears wouldn't stop. The door closed and Jennifer was gone. In the room, only Michael, Sarah, and I remained. Michael dropped to his knees and cried out loud. I put my arm around my son's shoulders. Our family was broken. But Ethan was still alive. That was the only hope we had. 1 year later, on a morning in my garden, Ethan took his first steps. He toddled forward and showed me a smile as he reached for my hand. "Mom, look, he walked!" Michael shouted. He'd finished the divorce proceedings and was now starting a new life with just him and Ethan. They often spent weekends at my house. I picked Ethan up, such a strong boy. Tears overflowed. But these weren't tears of sadness, they were tears of hope. Ethan had recovered after intensive care, the brain damage was mild, and he was continuing rehabilitation. The doctors called it a miracle, but I knew better. This wasn't a miracle, it was Ethan's strength and will to live. Jennifer received a 15-year prison sentence for child abuse. The last time I saw her in court, she looked at me and said, "I'm not wrong. You killed my sister first." The judge responded, "I can understand your pain, but you hurt an innocent baby. This is not justice." Since then, there's been no contact from Jennifer. I heard she has no visitors. That afternoon, Michael and I visited Emma Chen's grave. Every year on this day, March 15th, we bring flowers. In front of the gravestone, I spoke quietly. "Emma, I haven't forgotten you. Your sister made the wrong choice. But her pain was real." Michael put his arm around my shoulders. I continued, "I couldn't save you, I'm sorry. But Emma, your sister's son, Ethan, is doing well. He's learned to walk, he's learned to smile. I'll protect him because that's what I can do." The wind blew gently. Cherry blossom petals danced in the air. On the way home, Ethan was laughing in the back seat. Michael said, "Mom, thank you for saving Ethan. For saving me. We're family. Family protects each other." As a physician for 30 years, I made decisions in the space between life and death. I made the right decisions. But the right decision doesn't always lead to everyone being happy. Not being able to save Emma still weighs heavily on my heart. But I learned something. Pain doesn't have to become poison. Grief doesn't have to turn into hatred. Loss doesn't have to be a reason for revenge. Jennifer lost herself 15 years ago when she lost her sister. But I won't lose myself. Holding Ethan, I make a vow. I'll teach this child about love, I'll teach him about kindness, and I'll teach him to live with hope even while carrying pain. That's what real family is. That's what real healing is. In the evening sun, 3 generations go home together. My life hasn't been perfect. I've made many mistakes. There were lives I couldn't save. But now, in my arms, there's a small life I must protect. Eyes full of hope looking up at me with a smile. That's my answer. I was a physician. And now I'm a grandmother, protecting, loving, and raising Ethan. Never forgetting Emma, but choosing love instead of hatred. That was the beginning of my new life. Carol Martinez's new life.